Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us on today's Survey and Spatial webinar. Today we have Angela Joe from Future Path World, who is talking to us on module 3 of this webinar. If you do have any questions at all that you'd like Angela to answer while we're going through the presentation, please pop these through the Slido box and Angela will answer these as we go through. So thank you, Angela.
Thank you for that, Jenny. So welcome to module 3 of the personal branding seminars. So far, between Terry and I, we have covered what personal branding is, why it's important. We've talked about the value you bring and shaping the message about how you talk about that value that you bring. Today, we are going to talk about body language, we're going to talk about presentations and also reframing. So I'm going to start with a bit of a question. Did you know that 65 to 70% of the opinions people have about us come from non-verbal communication and our body language? And maybe some of you already knew that, but it is really about how you say something rather than what you say. So it's really important when we are building on our personal brand that we are aware of our personal body language and our non-verbal cues. So I'm going to start the workbook actually on page 15, where it talks about body language. So we're going to look at some tips and some tricks around body language. So I do also want to say that it's important to remember that not all body language cues and tips and tricks apply to all cultures. So please be aware of what you choose and make sure it works best for you, your situation, and those around you. I also want to say that a lot of these tips and tricks you will already know. It's really about bringing them back to front of mind and also thinking about how does this actually impact my personal brand. So the first one on that page talks about watching your hands. And I'm not going to talk about the negative pieces here. I'm just going to talk about the tips and tricks and what to remember when we are using our hands. And I like to talk about use our hands in open gestures. So this is better than this, right? So unless, of course, you're trying to make a point and you're going through a couple of points, let's just talk about those 3 points now. And then I'm going to talk about, firstly, I'm going to talk about this one. Secondly, this point. And then thirdly, this point, right? So use your hands to emphasize how big a project might be or how tiny a little task might be that can you please help me with this? Or you might want to talk about a sequence. So how that's going to work is this, and then this. So hand gestures can be really good. This, not so good, but this is a lot nicer. Be careful with crossing your arms and any closed body language, I guess. So make sure that your arms are open. It's always nice to be able to use our hands, and it makes us be more approachable and more engaged. Give eye contact. And again, you already know this, right? So when we're in a group situation, look at the person talking first or asking a question first, and then let's just say you're in an interview or in a team meeting, look at everyone else in the group as well. But look at the person asking the question first. In a presentation, it's good to scan through your audience, maybe look at a couple of people in the front row, third row, fourth row, whatever it is, but scan, do a bit of a scan and rest on certain people. Make sure you smile as well. Smiling is always positive. When it comes to your legs, I want to talk about where your feet are pointing. And it's really important to be aware of where your feet are pointing. So you may have noticed talking to somebody standing before, and that person may have been facing you, but their feet are actually facing away. That is telling me that they might be trying to be engaging with you, but they're actually also trying to get away. Wherever their feet are pointing is usually where they want to go. It's the same, not as much though. When you're sitting, sometimes when we're sitting cross-legged and our feet are pointing away, usually that means we're trying to get away. Legs as well. I have ADHD, so I jiggle a lot, and my legs jiggle. So that is one thing that I do have to be very mindful of managing, is the jiggle of my leg. Posture. Again, these are things because we sit a lot in our jobs, and especially if we're sitting in front of a computer all day, a lot of sitting means that our shoulders are hunched forward and slumped. So make sure your head is high and you put your shoulders back. It really conveys a lot of confidence around what you're talking about. Remember that body language affects perception. It affects how people perceive you. So looking confident really changes how you feel. And I also talk about this in terms of when you're making a phone call, even though the person can't see you on the other side of the phone, if we stand, if we have a confident body structure or body posture, and we're smiling, that really comes across in the phone conversation. Down the bottom of that page there, it talks about a confidence pose. It talks about the power pose. So this is around when we are really nervous. Maybe we have a presentation, or maybe we're talking to somebody and have a conversation that we need to have that might be a little bit difficult. Do the super being pose. Pretend that you're Superman or Superwoman or a super being, and stand there, maybe in a bathroom cubicle so nobody sees us, but stand there and really imagine that you're going out to battle, or you're going to fly around and really nail that conversation. It changes our physiology. There's research around that. So really key is that body language, and it's really about being intentional about what that body language is, and being aware of how you come across. Just as an example, I was working with a financial analyst, Ben, a few years ago, and in actual fact, he was really, really great at his job. He was a really great analyst. And what he had to do was to prepare reports and to make recommendations to the executive level. Now, his reports and his numbers were always solid, but he always got lost in his notes. He looked nervous, he looked unsure. And of course, because he looked unsure, of course, the executive team would potentially be unsure about his recommendations too. So when he came to me, we worked together about practicing around his hands. We talked about eye contact, all of the things that we've just talked through, right? Another thing we talked about too was, as he's talking and as people are asking him questions, nod. Oh, yes, I understand. Oh, yes. So those non-verbal cues as to I'm listening, right? Smiling when when the questions were asked, and it really came across that he was credible in his recommendations. And he has since moved on from that role to a senior role, and also beyond. Now, I do see a question coming up. How important is rapport in mirroring behavior? A couple of questions here. The end of that question is also, is a phone sometimes better if any conflict? Look, I always think that if there is a conflict in a conversation that you think is going to come up, think about how that conversation is going to go, what the best scenario is, and how you want it to go, and think about what you're going to say. You're not going to know what that person is going to come back and respond to you with, but be confident that you will get a solution at the end of that conversation. Going back to the question about mirroring behavior, I do agree. Mirroring behavior is really good, but it needs to be organic. Because a person is doing this, don't do that automatically, right? Don't just copy for the sake of copying. But mirroring, if you see that a person is mirroring your actions or your behaviors, it does mean that you're in sync. I hope that answered that question. All right. Any other questions about body language before we go into presentations? All right. Great. All right, so let's turn over then, and I'm on page 16 now, where it talks about presentations that create brand. And on this page, there is a simple structure around presentations. And why does this formula work? Basically, it's about open with a bang, and that bang might be asking a question, but asking a question that helps the audience ponder what might the solution be. Or the bang might be a surprise or a controversial statement. And by surprise, going backwards, by surprise, I mean, let's just say you're talking about health and safety, and you come onto stage or you come onto the into the front of the room and you trip over. So you are making a statement here where you're talking about health and safety, and it's something that might surprise the audience. So open with a bang. Doesn't have to be long, but open with a bang. The second piece is to link to pillars. So tell them what you're going to say. Have 3 key points that you're going to talk about, and then link what your opening is to what those pillars are. So basically tell them what you're going to say, and then discuss the pillars. Depending on how long you've got, maybe you have 3 pillars, maybe you have 4, but be very conscious of having too many within the time frame that you're going to be talking through. So it does need to fit within there, because you don't want to be rushing through your pillars. Okay. The next piece is to link to a closing statement. So summarize all your points and then link it to your close. And your close will be, well, why should those points or those pillars matter to you? And then end with a call to action. What do you want them to do next out of your talk? So to demonstrate this, what I thought I would do is to give you a sample. And I'm going to use personal branding as my talk. So to grab your attention, I might talk about, think about a time, or think about the most successful person that you know and admire. What sets them apart? And then I'll stop and wait for you to ponder, for you to get that person in your mind. And then I'll go on and talk about, often it's their personal brand that makes them memorable and influential. Today, I'm going to show you how you can build your own personal brand. And then I'll link you to the pillars. So today, what we're going to do is I'm going to discuss 3 core things that you need to think about when you are building your own personal brand. 1, the first thing is defining your unique value. Second is consistent messaging. Third, we're going to talk about authentic networking. So then I'd go into the 3 pillars, and I'm not going to do, those in detail, but you'll talk about the 3 pillars in detail now. Once I've talked about those 3, link to a closing. So by focusing on those 3 pillars, it'll demonstrate your value. You'll be able to maintain consistent messaging, and also be able to build and engage a network to really build an intentional personal brand, which will set you apart. So in closing and in summary, to build a strong personal brand, it's about showcasing your unique qualities on a consistent basis so that you can connect with others. It's about standing out and building an intentional reputation that reflects you and what you can bring. So I suggest that you start today and watch how your brand is right now, be aware of it, and what tweaks you can make to help open up opportunities to help achieve your goals. End of presentation. What were your thoughts around that? Easy, hard? Do you think you can do that? This is a presentation structure that we know works, and being simple means that it's easy to do, but more difficult, I guess, to put into practice. But the simpler it is, the easier it is for you to put that information in so that you don't confuse yourself with a whole lot of different information, right? So focus on the 3 pillars or the 4 pillars, depending on how much time you've got. We know that works. So as a part of that as well, what other areas do you think that those presentations will work? Because really, if we think about personal brand, we are presenting all the time. Any interactions that we have, we are presenting. If I am talking to someone at the water cooler or getting a coffee from the kitchen, you are always on. And this is something really important to think about, is that you are always on. However you come across, whether it's intentional or not, our personal brand is being displayed. So, and this is what I mean by being very intentional about what that personal brand is and how you want to be perceived. A good challenge as we test ourselves, like the strategy. Great. Thank you for that. All right. So if there are no other questions, I'm going to go straight into the next page where it talks about reframing. So now that we know that projecting ourselves and our personal brand is so important, it's really about knowing and being aware of where our personal branding is now. And how do we do that? Get feedback. Ask your colleagues and ask people that you work with, how do I come across? And be really specific in what those questions might be. So, you know, it might be around, you had a presentation last week or a couple of days ago, and whoever is in there that is a colleague, that someone that you really trust, you could ask them, how did I come across? Was my story compelling? Were my recommendations and my advice, did they sound sound? Were they solid? So ask specific questions. Don't just ask your colleagues, what's my personal brand like? So ask specific questions because it helps them to give specific feedback as well. Okay, so thinking about reframing, our behaviors, our language, and our responses, especially under stress, build our brand. And our behaviors and our responses are learned from our upbringing, our experiences, our cultures, and also our environment. Our environment when we were being brought up, but also now. What is the saying? We are the sum of the 5 people that we hang out with the most, right? And with that as well, we can include podcasts in there, and we can also include people that we follow if we follow them closely, right? So think about who are the people that are the 5 closest around me, and is this the perception that I want to be giving off as well? Because really, to change our personal brand, we need to change how we respond to situations. And a powerful way to do this is reframing. And on page 17 is the E plus R equals O formula. So that is the event plus response equals outcome formula. So let's break this down a little bit. This is a formula that all high-performing people use, and also all high-performing teams use in some form or other. So let's break it down. So the event is something that has happened to us or around us, and it's something that we can't usually change. For example, maybe it's about receiving that critical piece of feedback at work. And our response is how we choose to act or react to that event. And I say choose because a reaction is the knee-jerk reaction, right? We don't think about a reaction, it just happens. The response is something that we've thought about, and then we respond. And that's why I talk about it being a chosen response. Now, we can control our response with practice. When we are first faced with this particular formula, quite often we think, well, I can't change my reaction. It's about putting a space between the event, whatever the crisis was, and our response, and putting a gap or a pause within that. It might be taking a sharp breath. It might be quickly going for a run somewhere else, changing the state. But we must pause so that we can use our brain to think about and choose what is the response. Because the response has a direct correlation to the outcome. So our response is how we choose to act to the event. For example, instead of reacting defensively, which is a normal human reaction, is to react defensively or to be defensive. Instead of being defensive, we could thank the person and actually ask for specific examples of how to improve, or, what about that presentation didn't work so well? Also, within that, you could also ask other people within that presentation as well, that feedback is coming from, to validate that feedback. Did everybody think that, or was it just one person? So being open and being able to choose your response rather than your reaction. Because, like I said before, your response determines what the outcome is. So if you were to react and if you were to get defensive, you're not going to learn, or you may have a prickly relationship with that person. If you are open and want to explore a little bit more about that feedback and improve, and be open to, well, can you tell me a bit more about how I can improve? That will gain some respect, and also it shows your openness to grow within that area. As an example to that, actually not very long ago, I was working with Sarah, our marketing manager, and her personal brand was really around, she's very, very competent, but also defensive. She was known as someone quite difficult to work with. She loved coming up with ideas, because as a marketing manager, she loved being able to come up with great ideas and implement them. But the thing is that because she was so proud of her ideas and she wanted to be able to stamp her name on ideas and strategies going forward, she always felt a little bit criticized, and she always felt quite defensive when people asked her questions around her idea, which meant that her reputation was that she was a brilliant mind, but quite difficult to work with. So after reflecting, she really thought about, okay, yes, she has some great ideas and she's achieved some really great things, but she also didn't have great working relationships at work, even though she'd been there for 5 years. So to turn that around, she started to think about changing her response. And she changed her response to being more open to ideas. She's changed her response to bringing other people that also generate ideas, and started to collaborate with them. And, this all sounds very easy. It's not easy, right? It's really about taking those small steps. What small steps can I make to be more open, to be more collaborative? She started asking for specific suggestions on how she can improve, and she started working with her manager around this. So what actually happened was, over time, Sarah started coming up with some great ideas, but she started brainstorming with other creatives as well. And she found that her ideas were awesome, but actually combined with everybody else's ideas, she actually came up with some really amazing ideas that she could take forward. And with that, because she collaborated with everybody, everyone was on board, and they wanted to see her succeed, and they helped her implement. So she actually went on to create better relationships, better trust, great credibility, I guess, and she's got great relationships now. So just remember that the event may not be changeable, but our response always is. Our response is always changeable. We need to create that space between the event and our response to determine the outcome. It will take practice, absolutely take practice, but celebrate if you catch yourself. I always talk about celebrate the small wins. If you've never caught yourself before and you catch yourself for the first time, that's a win. If you catch yourself for the third or fourth or fifth time, don't beat yourself up that you didn't change that response. It's a process. Celebrate the process, right? So the 10th time, maybe you actually change your response. So that's my challenge for you. Because think about the last time your response didn't lead to a desired outcome. And think about, maybe you can reframe your response. I'd love to get some questions around the E plus R equals O. What are your thoughts? Do you like it? You've heard of it before? Yep. Comment here. Good example on opening up if defensive. Yeah, absolutely. And we can use it in many, many different areas. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to go down into the next page where it talks about the 10 traits of success. So the 10 traits of success, we've covered personal brand here. And look, there's an important, the personal brand is really important. And with that, it's about being really intentional with our interactions. And the personal brand piece is only the start, right? So there's 10 pieces around here. So let's go around them. So the second one here is around being curious. So I always think about being curious as, ask questions and explore ideas. Why could that be a great idea? Why does this work now? And how can we improve? Yep. So, and having that growth mindset, because that's what being curious is about, right? Having that growth mindset around, I don't know yet, but I'm going to ask some questions, or I'm going to explore what else could I do, or how else could we do this particular thing. So be curious. Be a problem solver. So successful folks see challenges as opportunities, and they're not afraid to think a little bit differently to get solutions, right? So when we are looking at solutions or looking at getting results, quite often we start here and we think it's a direct line to that result. And it's important to think about different perspectives, to ask questions, just going back to being curious, but also think about, well, what got us into this mess in the first place? So ask questions, but also with a solution in mind. Think about, you might not know what that solution is, but trying to get solutions. Because otherwise, quite often when we are in the weeds, we can't see that we're looking at a big picture. So think about how do we get out of this situation by looking at what solutions there could be. The next one is around taking risks, and taking risks, but with caution. I always think about taking risks with caution because I'm actually quite a big risk taker. I like to take risks and I like to try things out. And quite often this has got me in trouble. So I have actually learned now that I need to think about what the consequences are to taking that risk. And so that is about being cautious about what that risk might be, what could happen if I take that risk, what are the opportunities, but also what's the worst case scenario. So thinking through those so that we can work with calculated risk, because we've thought about what could go wrong. Within this too, it's a critical piece of decision making. Using data if you've got data, but also using evidence or collaborating, asking others to help you with decision making as well. And this really helps with building resilience in uncertain times. Be goal focused. So with being goal focused, and I always talk about here, be careful about having too many goals, because if we've got 10 or 15 goals, we're actually not going to give the focus that each deserves, right? So if we do have 10 or 15 goals, prioritize them. What are the top 3? And then work towards those. And then once we've mastered those, maybe we go back and go, okay, well, what are my next 3 that I'm going to master? What are my next 3 that I'm going to focus on? So be goal focused, but don't be overwhelmed with too many. Also here, I want to talk about, don't wait to be motivated. Motivation and momentum comes from action. And quite often we can get scared and we fear what could be next, right? And the antidote to fear and motivation, if we're struggling to find some motivation, is action. Take action. Even if it's a small step, make sure that you're taking action, because small actions create big success, but lots of small actions, right? And make sure it's measurable. Make sure you measure all of those small little successes as you're going along the way. Again, talking about growth mindset. Growth mindset talks about being curious, taking action, but also celebrate the small milestones. I've got a question here. How important is it to know your personality type, e.g. Myers-Briggs, and your own lens on problem solving or risk assessment? Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for that. I think it's really great to be aware of your own personality type and how you come across. And the great thing around that is when you know, you can surround yourself with others that have different ways of thinking and different perceptions, so that you can collaborate to come up with better ideas, and you can mitigate risk by collaborating, talking through what's your thoughts, what are your thoughts, and how do you think that we can move forward, right? So I always try to surround myself with different perspectives and different ways of looking at things. And a great way to do that is to know what other people's personality types are, or their thinking styles are. Great question. Thank you for that. All right, coming back to the next one, which is kia kaha, number 6. Kia kaha, staying strong. So in the face of challenges and in the face of change, and let's face it, change is all around us. It is the one constant all around us right now, and it's just going to get faster and faster. So within this, it's about finding the positives and the opportunities. Going back to what I said before about being a problem solver, sometimes when we're coming up around challenges, we just need to sit in it before we come to being that problem solver. And that can be quite difficult, because sitting in discomfort sometimes can be uncomfortable, right? But thinking about, well, what is it, and being reflective in what is it I'm feeling, how am I feeling it, and why. And you don't always come to the why, but it's a great way, that awareness piece is a great way to help build your self-belief. What is it now will be my next action? What can I do next? What is the opportunity? And it helps you to build that resilience, especially when change is absolutely constant now. Keep learning. Again, growth mindset. I keep coming back to this concept of growth mindset, and that is around, again, going back to being curious. Learning is about, being open to and trying new things, asking people what their approach might be, and being open to, there is no right or wrong. There's just different perspectives, right? So when we know that, and there is no right or wrong, it's just different perspectives, it can really help us to move forward and think about, well, in that opportunity or in that perspective, what could we do within that, right? I like to talk about too, when we're talking about learning, we are either winning or achieving, or we're learning. Instead of failure, it's learning, right? So we're either winning or we're learning. And I love that quote from Nelson Mandela, because he talks about, instead of failure, let's learn from that and keep going. Well, let's springboard off that failure or that learning and go forward. And I say, fail fast or learn fast. And that way we can get to the result, or we can get to the outcome faster. The next piece I want to talk about is staying healthy. Don't forget that when we're busy and when we're stressed, quite often we are the last people that we think about, right? We're the last person that we think, oh, I need to make sure that I'm eating properly or I'm getting enough sleep at night. And it can be difficult when we're stressed. So with this, our physical well-being is directly impacted. Sorry, our mental state is directly impacted by our physical well-being. And it's really important to think about, well, what does healthy mean for me? And within that, it might be meditation, it might be getting out for a walk, it might be, again, eating properly, making sure just because we're hungry and we're in a rush, maybe it's a little bit of planning. Instead of going for a chocolate, maybe it's about eating a boiled egg. I don't know. But, thinking through, how can I serve others when I'm not healthy and I haven't had enough sleep? So we need to think about us as well, because we are better to serve others when we are our full self. The last one here talks, well, actually, it's not the last one, sorry, talks about trust. Living with integrity and being our genuine self builds trust in relationships. And, trust is really around that consistency, isn't it? What is our personal brand and how do we want to come across? And how do we want to come across at all times, not just when people are watching? And that's what integrity is all about, isn't it? It's about being your authentic self and being trustworthy when people are not watching as well. So within all our relationships, whether it's personal or professional, that trust needs to be consistent. Because I'm sure you've dealt with or know people that one day they're happy, one day they're sad, one day they are frustrated, right? And because that inconsistency plays out, we can't trust that we know how they are going to be on any particular day. And I'm not saying that we have to be happy all the time, but be genuine in your consistency. And then I do come to the last one, which is gratitude. I've been practicing gratitude for the last 15 years. And there is so much research out there now about how gratitude really improves our lives, improves our mental state, our physical state. And in actual fact, I actually look for things to be grateful for now. And it's just a great way to live. I'm always looking for opportunities. And I'm even grateful for things that haven't even happened yet, right? So I've got a big presentation coming up in a month's time, and I'm nervous about it, but I'm also really grateful that I've got people around me that I can bounce ideas off. I've got technology that can help me to practice. So, I'm always thinking about what I'm grateful for. And I'm not saying that to say, look at me, I'm really, I'm great at having gratitude. I'm saying that because that's what I want for people around me and people in the world, because when we see opportunities and when we are grateful, it's always a great way to live. So each of these traits supports and reinforces successful lives, long-term success in any area. And so with that, and talking about our personal brand, coming back to Terry's very, very first statement in your first module, Dr. Seuss said, "There is nobody alive who is youer than you." And what I like to say is that why not be your youest you, but the most intentional youest you? Be aware of how you're coming across now and be very intentional about what your what the you is that you are putting forward. So coming down to the next page, which is page 20, this is my challenge for you. So on page 20, there is the 30-day challenge. And if there has been anything throughout the 3 modules that we've talked about between Terry and I, that we've talked about that you really want to change, create for yourself some goals around that and then prioritize them. So maybe your top 1 or 2 or 3, no more than 3, and challenge yourself to this 30-day challenge. And the 30-day challenge means write down the goal and do that thing at least once every day for 30 days. If you miss and you're doing great, and then maybe you miss on the 5th day, go back to 1. Start again your 30 days. You need to do it for 30 days. And then by then, hopefully, you would have created a habit and keep going. Maybe you look at the next thing that you want to master. Do it for 30 days. That's my challenge to you. Then the next page really talks about if anything in these modules has sparked something in you, or you want to have someone to talk to around any of these things. This page really just talks about reach out to us, and we love helping people on their personal branding journey, but also in the journey of self-development and helping themselves. So thank you very much, and that is the end of the booklet and also the end of this module. So thank you for your attention.